Thank you all for joining us. The Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for Vancouver City Council Position 3. Should change that in my notes. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor, and I will let members of the editorial board introduce themselves. Scott?
Scott Campbell here. I'm the recently retired publisher of the Columbian and still active in the business.
And Craig?
I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian.
And Ben?
Ben Campbell, publisher of the Columbian. I want to thank the three of you for being with us today.
And then Callie?
I'm Callie Hare. I cover politics for the Columbian, and I'll be observing and reporting on this meeting, but I won't be participating.
And then, as mentioned earlier, we are recording this and we will post it unedited on our website and our YouTube channel. Now, to the important part, let's get to the candidates. Why don't you take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, explain why you were running for this position, and then, okay. And then we will get into specific policy questions. So we'll start with Glen.
Yes. Thank you for having us. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I believe that people need to be as informed as they possibly can, and I appreciate the efforts that you guys make in making sure our city is aware of what's happening. And so I am Glen Young. I am a dad of 5. I'm a husband. I'm a small business owner. And I love Vancouver. I've lived here for 20 years. Moved here when I was 21. Best choice I ever made in my life. Vancouver is a great place to live. It's quiet. It has a really unique community feel to it. And the people that live here love to live here. So I honestly was just kind of living my life. I would say my situation is a bit unique in the sense that 3 years ago, if you had asked me if I'd be running for city council, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. I was living my life, raising my 5 kids, running a small business, and didn't really feel like I had time for a whole lot more. I was engaged civilly in the sense that I would vote, in elections and things like that, but was more privately involved in the community. So more among the groups of friends that I already had. And so a city project came and kind of stirred that all up. And it kind of awoke in me something I didn't know existed. And so since then, I have just become very passionately involved in our community in all different aspects. I have studied everything that there is to study in the city and how it runs and how it connects to its citizens. And I have just been super involved in that. And like a sponge for information, I really feel like the more information I can have, the more I can understand people and the things that they need and the things that they want in the city. And I just want to make Vancouver a place where everybody's lives can be better. And that's why I'm running for city council.
Thank you. We'll go to David.
Hi, my name is David Gellatly. I've been involved in the community for quite a while now. Lots of nonprofits and community programs that I've sat on boards and been a part of, and local politics. So as far as this year went, I had been talking to several people in the ICC, Identity Clark County, and the business leaders in the downtown area, as long as those involved with the development going on downtown. And we were seeing issues that kind of start from the Portland metro area and we're extending over to our area that we were hoping to have more solutions, address these issues that we're seeing start to reach into Vancouver. And in those discussions, I think there was a lot of people were able to identify the problems that we were seeing, and not so many were pushing towards solutions for some of these issues. So especially with the homeless issue, there are solutions, and I've spent a lot of time talking to people about how we can address it with both private investment and working with the city, and just not seeing that go anywhere. So as somebody that's had a lot of success sitting on boards and driving solutions, both being the president of my HOA and city on other boards, I went ahead and decided to volunteer to run for the seat this time around. I've lived in the city of Vancouver in Clark County for over 20 years. I love the city. I have lots of friends and extended family all throughout the city too. So it's something that I think we have a really unique opportunity to bring business into Vancouver right now. They're leading major metropolises, and we have a lot to offer here in Vancouver. And I think if we take advantage of that, we could bring family wage jobs into our city so people aren't stuck driving across the bridge and giving 10% of their income to Oregon and sitting in traffic for 2 hours a day. But we can work right here in the city that we live and love and raise our families. So with that opportunity, I don't want to see us go the wrong direction where we follow suit with Oregon and businesses are wanting to leave that kind of environment. So I am trying to step up just to help our city kind of guide in the right direction and take advantage of the opportunities that we have, and also provide some real leadership in these areas that we're struggling in right now.
Thank you. And Diana, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. My name is Diana Perez, and I was raised in the Southwest where my parents instilled a hard working ethic in me. And my father was a union member, my mother a nurse, and they worked long days to provide for my brother, sister, and I. I am a proud first-generation graduate of Texas Tech University, where I earned my Bachelor of Science, Oregon State University, where I earned my Master of Science, and recently I obtained my graduate certificate from Cornell in Executive Women in Leadership. I moved to our Pacific Northwest to start my professional career as a biologist and establish my family's roots right here in Vancouver. And it was because of safety concerns that I became co-chair of our East Old Evergreen Highway Neighborhood Association and wrote our neighborhood action plan to reduce speed and improve walkways. Public service is in my DNA. While I worked full-time professionally in public land management, I volunteered my time as a community advocate in civil rights. And it is because of this volunteer work of over 10 years that I saw up close the need for equitable policies. I've served on the city's long-range budget planning committee that worked to provide better city programs and services for our residents, and most recently served on the city task force on council representation to come up with recommendations for improving participation in our city government. I am running for office because we need a fresh perspective on our Vancouver City Council, a voice that will bring people together, really listen and build trust. I will use my experience, skills, education, and relationships to advocate for all the people in Vancouver and bring representation from the east half of the city that is currently missing on our city council.
Great, thank you. And that reminds me, I should mention that the incumbent in this position is not seeking re-election. So the incumbent is not in the race. Just we'll move on to some specific issues. Let's start with the pandemic. How would you assess the city's reaction, and where do we go from here? What's needed? Let's start with David.
Well, I mean, everybody's reaction was a little delayed, right? We'd never been in this situation before. So everybody, I think, was doing the best they could with the information that we had. The information continuously changed, and so our response had to be adaptable. I appreciate the updates that we were being given by the city along the way, and I know they were following the guidelines they had been given. So overall, we're coming through the pandemic now, and I think what we're seeing as the biggest obstacle that now our local businesses are struggling with is labor. It's really hard to get people back into the labor force right now, based on both incentives with unemployment and also just the rate of pay has gone up significantly. I've been trying to hire people, and starting salaries for people at college is significantly higher than it was pre-COVID. I've talked to like Mark Mathias the other day from Beaches, and he wants to be fully open back to business, but his only obstacle that he's really struggling with to be full blown back where they were pre-COVID is that he can't find the workforce to support it. And I hear that from business owners all over the place. So, and it really getting us back to where we were pre-COVID is going to, require us to support business owners that are in that struggle right now, trying to find labor. And then also, there's been a lot of delays in some of the development. Some people have had to shut down. And so just really trying to bring back those the jobs that were lost during COVID, and being able to match people that are looking for positions with the right positions. If we can be a resource for our community to match employees with employers and try to get really everybody back to work, and employers fully capable of servicing the needs that they're now seeing, with the restaurant community, that's a huge one. So overall, I think that the city did a good job of relaying information to the citizens. And now as we come out of it, I just hope that we can all come together and move forward as a community.
Great, thank you. Diana, what are your thoughts on what the city's role should be?
Well, what we went through with the pandemic taught us so much. So there is definitely a learning role in this, and we're continuing to learn from it. It taught us that we need to be better prepared, and that there is much work to do to build resiliency for the future so we can weather the next event, the next economic downturn. And quite simply, nobody was prepared. So there's 3 areas that could have been done better. At the immediate onset, I think communications were challenging. For example, if you were a small business owner, you had no idea what was going on, and all you knew was that the doors were shut. Same thing for businesses along Fourth Plain, where there are some language barrier issues, and then more specifically for unhoused population. But given everything, it was unforeseen at a massive scale. So we need to take what we experienced and the lessons learned to do better. So here's the thing: rebuild the local economy that results in a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable city. Prioritize our household and businesses impacted by the pandemic, and ensure that nobody is being left behind in our recovery efforts, especially those small businesses owners, their employees, and essential workers. And for economic development, we need to address the 4 L's: labor, land, lumber, and the laws. So there is this mix of things that we need to ensure that it's at the forefront moving forward.
Great, thank you. And Glenn?
I honestly think that the city did a pretty darn good job considering the circumstances that we were in. Could we have made things better? Yeah, we could have. But I mean, nobody has the crystal ball to be able to know. I mean, even in our personal lives, we didn't know how to plan. The business that I own, I had to make some really critical decisions, and the uncertainty of what lied ahead in April was unbelievable. So the city dealt with the same issues, and I think they did a great job of reeling back spending just in case. That left us in a very good position, and it would have left us in a very good position if a lot of the economic damage that we had originally foresaw came forward, so we would have been able to contend with that. So I think their response to the actual pandemic was great. And now we're starting to roll out of it. And the question is, where do we move from here? And I think this is a critical discussion that needs to be had with the community. I think we need to seek to have involvement in every way that we can as to what the priorities are for this. I've seen a couple things that are concerning to me. One was we have about $30 million coming to the city for COVID relief. And it seemed like the story that was being discussed at the council meeting was, how can we use these funds for other things in the city aside from COVID relief? I believe I heard mention of, can we use the funds for parks? Don't get me wrong, parks are incredibly important, but I just don't see the connection to COVID. I think those funds really need to be focused on COVID relief and the small businesses and the families that have really struggled. I did see Councilmember Hansen mention, relief on people's utility bills. That's something that the city could do for people that are behind on those payments. It didn't gain any traction. He didn't gain any support on that. So I am concerned a bit that we need to make sure and focus on those who really were harmed in this thing. Because it was just the odd thing about it is some people, their lives improved from it, and financially, right, economically. obviously nobody's lives improved when they couldn't have, human to human contact with their friends and family. But it affected all of us so differently. Some were so dramatically impacted by it, and others really didn't notice any dramatic change in their economic situation. So I think it's very critical that we really study to find out those sectors, those groups that were harmed, and make sure and focus that, those funds that we've received to provide relief to those individuals and businesses.
Great, thank you. Craig?
So policing is one of the major tasks of the city of Vancouver. I'm interested in what the candidates think about the body-worn camera program and whether they think the level of police funding in Vancouver is about right, a little too much, or a little bit needs to be improved a little bit. So let's start with Diana.
Thank you, Craig. So just to go back, right now, our city services and public safety do not meet the demands of our population. So does that mean more funding is needed? I think across the board, the city is working really hard to increase its toolbox for ensuring that we meet the demands of our increasing population in terms of public safety and other programs and services. Now, when it comes to the Vancouver Police Department, I have talked to the chief, and one of the main things is building that trust with the community. The recent shootings, the 4 shootings that happened in a very short period, was quite traumatic for our community here in Vancouver. And I know that there's been a lot of effort to address that, to rebuild the trust, and that's just a never-ending effort that our Vancouver Police Department has to do, along with the county sheriff. So there have been productive conversations about public safety as a priority, and understanding with our communities, specifically our communities of color. So I know that the council task force on policing is reviewing the PERF report. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the acronym for the PERF, but 84 recommendations. That includes de-escalation techniques, or more policing, less lethal weapons, and so forth. So that is good, but there could be more, such as collecting data on traffic stops, increasing the training on less lethal weapons, having more available less lethal weapons, really merging the efforts with mental health in the HEART program, and working hard to insert and start talking about some community-based strategies that will help build that trust. With that can mean more funding. And I know that our staff is working, the police staff, I know they're hardworking. I know that they are out there to provide the safety. And so one of the things is dealing with misconduct. And so how do you do that? And I know that we've got top training here with the Vancouver Police Department. I know that there's bills that are coming out and set in place at the state. So there is an effort to improve and move forward and really continue to build that trust. So that's the number one priority, in my opinion, is building that trust that we need to continue to provide public safety for our communities and meeting the needs and the demands of a growing population.
Okay, thank you for that comprehensive answer. David, what are your views on policing?
Well, first off, I think we can identify what doesn't work, and it's a national pandemic right now going on through the major cities that have defunded police. 800% increase in murder, and the homicide rate down in Portland is the highest in the nation. That's literally across the Columbia River, and you're in the highest increase in murders in the whole country. So that's right knocking at our door, and we don't want to mirror the failed policies of Portland. On this side, we have to actually take a stronger stand because it is so close. It can just kind of pour across the river if we don't do something here. So removing funding from a police force and increasing crime is the wrong direction. We can see that. I don't think there's any question there. but I do believe in increasing accountability. And with that, I think it requires an investment, right? So the body cams would be a pretty large investment in the police force, but I think it's a necessary. And I think that adds accountability on all sides, both, you know, there isn't questions as to whether or not things happened if it's all on video. So I definitely believe investing in the body cams. I think every single officer should be able to have one on at all times. And increased training, that's also an investment. So while I think overall the budget needs to increase along with the increase in our population, I do think it requires some initial investment just to increase the training for the needs that we've seen take place in the past few years, where there is situations that could have been de-escalated, but they weren't. That requires more training. But in the body cam thing, I think that's something we need to invest in immediately and provide that to BPD immediately. So I think that we have been about where we need to be overall as a budget, but we need to increase that as long as the population increases at the same kind of level. But I do think overall we need to make that initial investment to provide the additional training and body cams.
So I want to follow up on that. Would you increase overall city revenue, or would you cut some other programs?
Well, I think that's where you're looking at the full budget, and I do think that there are areas that you can always make some adjustments, but we probably have to increase the budget. And whether, some of that comes from if we have more people moving here and more homes built here, there's an increase in property taxes and business. I mean, there was a package, the Stronger Vancouver, but it was an inflated package. It had a lot of wants and not needs. I do think we have to have a tax package that makes sense, that actually has needs that we need to address immediately before we go into trying to include all of our wants, dreams, and desires in that package. But I do think there is a need to increase the revenue to be able to fund.
Okay, thank you.
Craig,
Glenn, you want to try? Oh, sorry. So let's give Glenn a chance first, and then if there's some other fast thoughts, we can all add them after that. Thank you.
Great. So first of all, I don't think the body cams could come soon enough. I think that we actually were considerably behind on that. I went on a ride along with one of our police corporals a couple of months ago, and through this whole conversation and actually being in that ride along, I honestly was stunned to realize that we didn't even have dash cams in our police department. So that was a surprise to me. I was always under the complete assumption that we had that at a minimum and that we were only adding body cams. So those can't come soon enough. They provide accountability on both sides. They protect both the citizens and our police officers. So I compare this kind of like, a grocery store versus a gas station. You can go to a gas station to get food, right? But it's really not the best food. It's probably not very healthy, and it's very expensive. So, and that's kind of how I see, back to the ride along that I went on. It was a graveyard shift, and there were only 2 events the whole entire, either 2 or 3, but all of them were social issues. They were social issues. They were not in any circumstance an issue of public safety. And so back to the grocery store, gas station, I think that our police are asked to take on way more than they should be taking on. So I think that we need to create more resources that are able to help relieve our police of some of those issues that they shouldn't be dealing with in the first place. Their job is to provide public safety. So when they are called out, they should be there to analyze the situation and make sure that everybody's safe. Beyond that, we should have other measures ready to take care of what the actual issue is that's taking place. And so, for example, if there is a mental health issue, the police arrive, make sure everybody's safe, make sure that whoever we bring in to address that individual also is safe through the whole thing, and that's their role. They shouldn't be trying to wind this person down. They're not trained to do that. That's not their specialty. The city manager has department heads that he directs, he doesn't know all the issues that they're dealing with because he can't possibly cover everything and know everything like that. And I think that it's similar to that. We need to allow our police to be fine-tuned to what they're doing and not be spread too thin and have to be trained on so many different issues. I don't think it's effective that way. And in terms of how we would pay for some of these extra resources, the city just passed a supplemental budget that increased by, I believe, 70 million. That's a significant number, and that is due to the fact that we did things appropriately during the pandemic, which was we scaled back real big to protect ourselves. But I did see a few things that just kind of snuck into that budget that haven't really been discussed, haven't really been talked about. And when you're talking about a $70 million supplemental budget, it's easy for little things like that to get missed. So I do think that we're in a situation in the city where we do have some discretional spending and we can make some adjustments without asking the public for more.
Okay. Thank you. Diana, did you have a quick go back on that?
Yes, I did. Thank you. When it comes, so the body cameras are not going to solve the issues that we have right now. They're going to instill, they're just going to protect both the person and the police officer. And what really matters are the associated policies with use of the body camera. Now, I applaud expanding the camera program to wearing it, to on the dash cam, to the back of the car. But really, it's what are those policies for how we're going to use the body camera program and when. So that, for me, is very important to emphasize. Thank you.
Greg, I had a quick add-on too.
Yeah, Dave.
To tack on to what Glenn was saying, I do think that it's often that we combine mental health, addiction, and crime all into the same box. And I think that fills our jails and takes our police force outside of what it should be used for. And I think that we do need to look at ways that we can invest in mental health and addiction programs, both in a non-criminal way, but also in a way that actually can produce real results in treatment and getting people out of the situations that they're in or the help that they need for mental health. And I don't think that's something that we've invested in enough as a community or even as a society necessarily. I think that we do criminalize mental health issues, and that is overbearing on our police force and our jails. And I would like to see us as a city really look at how we could do things differently in that area.
So again, turning that into a budget question, would you advocate for increased revenue, increased spending to cover that, or would you cut other programs?
Well, Greg, I'd have to look at exactly what would be cuttable before I could say we'd cut programs. I think that we can always make some adjustments here and there to try to make it fit. But if it's a need, we got to find a way to fund it. And so if it's a need and we don't have the ability to fund it in our current budget, we need to look at ways to fund it. But I always think there's ways to do things a little bit better when we're looking at the budget that we have now, and we can make some tweaks where we're not going out and just grabbing a ton of revenue, but we're trying to make the best decisions with the funding that we currently have. Before, I'd always look at ways to fund it with what we have before I go look at taking more from business and residents.
Sure. Diana?
Thank you. There was reference to the Stronger Vancouver being a wish list. And I just want to reemphasize that when the firefighters and the police department put together the needs, it was not a wish list. This was the list of needs that they felt had to occur or take place or needed funding for to meet the public safety demands of a growing population. I just wanted to emphasize that because it's very important for folks to understand the work of Stronger Vancouver. Thank you.
I got to clarify that because she took something.
Hold on. Diana, you mentioned that Stronger Vancouver in relation to police and fire, but do you think were there other items on there that were more of a wish rather than an? Diana?
Yeah, Right. So there's like, this is how much we can have with this much. If we can get more funding, this is what more we can do. If we could get additional funding, this is what more we could do. So it's a list of priorities. And after the pandemic, I'm hoping the city will pick that up and brush it up because a lot has happened, and dust it off and reprioritize with some good community input. So I just wanted to emphasize that this Stronger Vancouver is not a wish list. Thank you.
Sure. Glenn?
Yeah, I honestly, I think that Diana and David are both right in this situation. I think there are parts of Stronger Vancouver that are important and critical, and we really need to take a look at and see if there's a way that we can fund it with what we have, or if we need to increase funding in one way or another. The one thing I will say, is, being a business owner, I'm in construction. One of the things that I see during different times is a significant change in behavior. And I think this happens all over the board. I don't think government's immune from it. So for example, I was just at my job site the other day following the electricians having come in and done their part. And something that I've never seen before was that they just threw all of the scrap wire into the garbage. So the scale of the economy has changed such that the electricians don't really feel like it's worth their time to save that scrap wire, even though copper's at like record high prices right now. So my point is, during good economic times, when you have a lot of revenue coming in, you start to, and I think it's just typical human behavior, you start to not really be paying attention to the small things. And so little bits of money disappear, and it's okay, because from an overall financial perspective, it's minute, right? But nonetheless, there is that waste that's taking place. So there's always things that we can do to kind of, constrict that and take a look, evaluating process of how we can save some of that money that might be going to things that are not necessarily critical, or how we can reduce contract prices, things like that. So just wanted to bring that in.
And David, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to clarify. I think, and with all due respect, I think Diana is the only person that has referred to the Stronger Vancouver as a wish list. When I had referred to it, I had mentioned that there was, the needs, the wants, and the wishes in a package, and that we needed to focus on the needs first. So I in no way had referred to it as a full wish list. I just wanted to make sure that we're focusing on the needs first, and wanted to clarify that.
Sure, fair enough. Let's move on to, I think something that has been touched upon is homelessness. How do we address that, and what are your thoughts about the city's current plan for dedicated campsites? And let's start with Glen.
Okay, this is a challenging topic, obviously. First of all, I want to give a little bit of a backdrop in history. I'm sure everybody in this room, in this meeting, is very well aware of the Navigation Center and the challenges that took place with the Navigation Center. So we have to, appreciate that we tried something, but we failed. We all have to admit it failed. It's closed now, and COVID was the final nail in the coffin. COVID wasn't the reason that it closed. So, and we have to really back up and take a look at, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? It's so critical to learn from our mistakes. So in terms of the new plan that we have, first of all, I have the utmost respect for Jamie Spinelli. I've been talking with her for several years now. She is an amazing resource. She is somebody that I have learned to trust, because the one thing that I have come to recognize in government is everybody seems to come to the table with their own objectives, and they typically kind of have a tunnel vision. This is what I'm focused on. Everything out here is less important. This is what we need to achieve. When in reality, everything else around still is important, right? So we can't just focus on this one issue and ignore everything else around it. And I think that was part of the problem with the Navigation Center, And I met Jamie because she was one of the few people that are very involved in the homelessness issue, who was what's the best word I would say, who recognized the problems of the navigation center and didn't look at it as like, look, this is helping the homeless, which none of us would question that. I mean, it provided services that they really need, desperately need. So nobody questions that, but there is a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. And we have to do our best to help everybody, but we can never do it at the cost of somebody else. And that's what happened at the Navigation Center. We sacrificed our neighborhoods for those services that were provided. So where we messed up is we didn't listen from the beginning. There was a lot of citizen testimony and discourse that took place that were warning our city that, look, our neighborhood can't handle this. And probably the single worst thing that happened as a result of the Navigation Center was this division that was created between neighborhoods and the homeless community. That I can't emphasize that enough. But when you implement a program in a wrong way, it creates serious division, and sometimes it can even create hatred. So you have to be very careful with that.
And I'm sorry, I want to move forward a little. So real quick,
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the plan for dedicated campsites?
Okay, so first of all, what I think we need to do is we need to work with our homeless advocates and the service providers that we have in the city. I think we need to take a look at models like the Veterans Assistance Center. They have housed very many people with the funding. They get a very small amount of funding versus all of the other service providers, and yet they're very successful at housing people. So we need to take a look at models here locally. We need to take a look at models outwardly, have how we can get people off the street to begin with, right? And then we're going to still have this residual group that are on the street, and how do we deal with them, with that situation? And I believe that Jamie's plan is appropriate. The challenge that we have with it is now going back to our neighborhoods and asking for buy-in after what took place with the Navigation Center. So how do we address that? And that's going to be the biggest challenge. But what she has planned is a way that we can mitigate the impacts to the neighborhood by controlling these sites, right? We control what happens there. We make sure there's not the trash problem that we see. They will, if the city follows through with it and they do adopt her plan as she has recommended, we'll have mental health services, we'll have drug addiction services, we will have people there. And the key is everybody knows that it is up to the individual to change. They have to have the correct mindset, and that might come one day. And right now, the way things are, it comes and they're like, you know what, I'm tired of this. I want to change my life. And they don't know where to go. Nobody's there. And if somebody is there, they tell them and they're like, okay, we'll get you an appointment in a week. That doesn't work, right?
Glenn, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to move on. David, your thoughts?
Okay, so I'll start off just with the homeless camps throughout our neighborhoods and parks. I think it's a horrible idea. I've looked into this a lot. There are solutions that do work for the homeless situation that have been proven in other cities. San Diego is a good example, one, and Rhode Island had one. It's where you first have to identify the 3 tiers of the situation. Tier 1 is just creating accountability. So where you would find a designated area for a campsite. We have the work release program and the treatment center down by the port. The port, you can have BRT down there. It would be a good area that's not in a neighborhood. You set up parameters and you say, okay, if you're going to camp, here's an area that you can camp in. And then here, we had tens of millions of dollars offered up in funding for a day shelter type navigation type center, which was done all the wrong way the first time, but we could do it the right way. We had the talks with the Union Gospel Mission as far as being an operator for it. We had a lot of things that we can do that we just aren't doing. But if you create that tier 1 thing where you can get people into an accountable situation first, and then tier 2 would be getting them into programs, whatever that treatment, mental health, any kind of whatever program gets them into some sort of housing. We would partner with the providers that are doing the housing. I just met a couple of days ago with Casper, who's building the one up in Hazeldale, a 65 unit, but places where they do the sober housing. And then from there, the tier 3 would be getting into permanent housing and a job. So if you identify the 3 tiers and how you can invest in each one, then you can move people through the system to get them back on their feet. But I was down by Share House on 15th and King. I was talking to everybody in the camps down there, and there's an 80-year-old gentleman down there that he gets beat up all the time. If anybody goes and donates anything to him, somebody sees that he has something new, and somebody else from the camp comes and they're like, well, you're older than me and I can beat you up and I'm going to take it. And then he takes it to his tent. And then I was having a discussion with a lady down there who's raped repeatedly in that camp. And there's no accountability. That's not compassionate to let these camps be the way they are. It's putting people in criminal elements that they don't have the ability to get out of. So until we create accountability in an area that makes sense, they're going to be stuck in that. And then we want to identify how to get people out of that situation and into the programs that get them really back on their feet. I will say that if we had that ground level accountability for tier 1, I know for a fact that there are people in those camps that will not deal with accountability. They'll go back on the other side of the bridge or wherever they want to go outside of an area where they're held accountable for anything. So the problem will get that much smaller just by creating accountability first. And then when I've been talking to the people and I ask everybody where they came from, about 2/3 have come here, about 1/3 are from this area for over a couple of years. So and a lot of them have come up from California or from east coming west towards the I-5 corridor for different reasons. They've heard it was a good place for homeless people to come and be taken care of. What we can't do is say housing first. That's if we tell everybody you come to Vancouver, you get a free house, everybody's going to come to Vancouver. But we have to have some type of program that gets people into housing that are from our community. And I don't like the idea at all of putting camps all over, because we are not going to control that. There will be drug use, there will be the criminal element in there. But if we can take it outside of the neighborhoods and actually create real parameters with real accountability that are patrolled, and then we have real trained operations to come and manage that, and then start people in that program, we can solve it here in Vancouver, and we can help the people that really want help in our city.
So you don't think the proposal for dedicated campsites, you don't think that would provide that accountability?
No.
Or could improve safety for the residents?
It will slightly be more manageable than it is right now, where it's at random places. But even if you can go to over there by the YMCA on 112th, there's trash everywhere, there's needles everywhere, there is crime going on. Even down there by the Share House, like I've gone through and talked to these people. There's bad things that happen there every single night, and they're all aware of it. And the people that actually want to get better or help, they want accountability that's not happening. And I don't think that designating the areas that are, and you're starting where they're already at, so basically all you're doing is putting some needle drops in bathrooms there, that's not going to change the environment, and it's not going to help people out of it. We can do a lot better than that proposal, I think, and we shouldn't be putting that on the neighborhoods. And I've been some of the parks, I was down there at Marshall Park, there was needles all over. You can't even let your kids play there. They leave the camps to do drugs and then come back. That's not, it's just, I think all around it's going to be about the same as what we're seeing, and it's not going to make anything better.
Okay, thanks. I want to move on, Diana.
Thank you. I believe that local approaches need to include an immediate crisis response and long-term solutions. So an immediate crisis response includes having those sanctioned encampments, safe parking areas, access to emergency shelter, contact with the wraparound team, clear guidelines on trash pickup. And long-term solutions are having affordable housing and continued wraparound services in supportive housing. And the perfect example of supportive housing is the city's first affordable housing development, which was built using trauma-informed design concepts. It's the Elwood Affordability Housing Community Project, and it's located in a commercially zoned transit corridor that under previous city code would not have been allowed. So New zoning updates and the city's affordable housing fund are part of several measures that the city has been taking to provide more affordable housing in the community. And purposeful location to close proximity to stores and transportation will help people who are coming out of being homeless with behavioral challenges, and they'll receive comprehensive supportive services, intensive case management, and rental assistance so that they have that stable housing. So as a city council member, I commit to working on changes in city zoning standards to allow more affordable supportive housing like Elwood. I also recognize that the city has continued to do a lot of work in addressing affordable housing. And as a city council member, I commit to that zoning reform, such as getting rid of exclusionary zoning policies and going further by making it easier to site housing and shelters by making land available for these uses, whether it's owned by the city or not. Taking it further and looking for ways to make zoning and land use more inclusive so that housing and emergency shelter have an advantage in getting sited. And we can't just rely on status quo and Band-Aids. We need new ideas that include working with our developers and providing incentives, changing our area median income. We must make it pencil out for our residents and for our developers when we are looking at affordability. And we can do that.
Thank you. Glenn, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that the city's plan is nothing more than a way to stop the bleeding, essentially. It is just the start. It is the way to mitigate the impacts to the neighborhood. But I mean, we could spend this entire time discussing this one issue. There's so many things that go into it, but we got to get as many people into housing, and those that we can't or that are not willing to, then what do we do? And I think the city's plan, as long as they follow through and are transparent and really work with the neighborhoods, is a temporary solution to do that.
Sure. Thank you. Let's move on. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, then one thing I'm wondering about, two recent issues, the Tower Mall Heights development and the Columbia Street paving with bike lanes. I'm rather than your thoughts about whether those should go forward or not, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the process and how the city council approached that and their engagement with the community in developing those two proposals? And we'll start with David.
I think Tower Mall was done much better than Columbia Street, but I think there's still a lot of work to do. I'm a really big component of being representative governments. So the city council members are there to represent the people, not represent staff. And although staff can bring educated proposals and ideas and support ideas, when it came down to it, all the neighborhood associations had almost unanimously opposed replacing the parking with bike lanes on Columbia, and the city council tried to just push it through. Then they decided to listen to the citizens, but then they ignored the citizens and they pushed it through anyway when it all came down to it. I think that was just really poorly handled. With Tower Mall, I think I would have liked to see the city invite citizen participation and ask for the opinions of the neighborhoods rather than neighborhoods having to go in their full force and demand to be heard. I do think that the outcome was a lot better because there was communication between the neighborhoods and the city, and they came to a lot of understanding and agreement with each other in the end. And so the final outcome, I thought, was a lot better because of the process. I do think that it was, I would give the citizens and the neighborhoods more credit than the council for the way that had to take place. I think that the city did a good job of coming around to it in the end. But overall, that process the brokenness was seen more on the Columbia side with the process than it was over the Tower Mall process. And but I think if we can come into that communication with the neighborhoods and and the city's asking for it and actually wanting to understand and taking that into consideration, that'll go a lot smoother in the future on future projects.
Okay, thank you. Diana, your thoughts?
Yes, I've listened to folks on various sides of the issue regarding these projects, and what's clear to me with regard, for example, to the Columbia project is that the relationships between the city and some of the people involved needs to be mended. I think there's distrust and trust needs to be rebuilt. For the Heights plan, that has been a long process and citizens have been involved along the way. There are remaining issues, for example, the height of the building and parking, and the city needs to do as much as possible to balance those competing interests. And so that's what the process does at the onset is identify those competing interests and work to balance that and negotiate and compromise. Now, the Heights District Plan is intended to create a thriving area where people can live, they work, and enjoy their parks and open spaces, as well as restaurants, stores, and have that easy access to public transportation. So we can't stop growing, and that the process needs to be clear and upfront for our residents. And I believe that the city did initiate initial process by reaching out to the neighbors. Now, did every neighbor respond? Probably not, but the process was followed. I think that in some cases, the process might have been extended specifically for the Columbia project to work at getting it right. So I think that when the process is explained well in advance, there's a better idea of what the road ahead is.
Okay, thank you. And Glenn?
First of all, I don't think there's anybody in this city that can answer this question any better, because I literally have been in the trenches. I have been in hundreds of meetings. I've been in meetings with lots of people from the Heights District. I've been in tons of meetings with all the residents of the Columbia Street project. And you know, there's a recurring theme that has taken place. And I think it really comes down to understanding the role of a city councilor. The role of our city council is, our structure of government here is that we have a city manager that essentially runs the city with the guidance of our city council. And I do think that is the best way that our city can be run. I know as an elected city councilor, I won't have the knowledge, the ins and outs of how to finance all this stuff. I mean, it's just impractical to ask an elected official to do those things. So the city manager setup is a great setup, but the city council needs to understand their role. And they are literally elected to represent the citizens and to be their check and balance against the power of the city manager. I mean, the city manager is essentially the executive branch, and you have to look at the city council as, like the legislative part. And they're our check and balance. They have to have their thermometer out there to feel how people are feeling about certain things. And as city council, staff have been trained well to do things. And sometimes the right thing to do is the wrong thing to do. That happens. Because when you look at some of the projects, so the Heights development, the bike project on Columbia Street, both of those are to accomplish important goals that our city needs. It really does. Now, how we went about it is where the problem lies. We could have done other things on Columbia that equally achieved our goals without the impacts. And I do agree with David that they did a much better job. There's still some room for improvement, but a much, much better job in the Heights. I agree it did take a little bit longer, and it took way more effort from the residents than should have been needed in order to accomplish some of those changes. But it comes down to the city council We are elected, and that is true. We can use our own judgment and our own views and ideals when we make decisions for the council. But there comes a point in time where you have to recognize, you know what, my view that I have is not the view of our community at large. And so I need to set my agendas, my ideas aside on this one, and I need to represent the people. And that is not what happened and what needs to change.
Great, thank you. I think we'll move on if nobody else has a question. Well, okay, give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements. And we'll start with Glen.
Sure. That is a question that I often ask myself. And what it comes down to is, in these last 2.5 years that I have been so involved with neighborhoods and all the citizens and groups, and have been to every council meeting in the last 2.5 years. I've been to every planning commission meeting in the last 2 years. I testify at the majority of them in behalf of the citizens already. I literally will hit the ground running as a city council member. I have really more or less been one. I just haven't had the ability to vote. And I've had a 3-minute clock in my face that restricts me from talking any longer than that. But honestly, it's the people in this city that have gotten me to decide to run. I've been asked continually over and over and over to please represent them on the city council. And it was not a decision that I made lightly. Having 5 kids and running our own small family business, it's a challenge, to come up with the time commitment that it takes to do this. I've been doing that for 2 years, well over 2 years. My family is very supportive. My wife is absolutely amazing, and she picks up the slack in these times when there are big issues that take more time than other times when things are kind of quiet, and that does happen. People in our neighborhoods are the ones that have really inspired me to run. And as far as endorsements go, yes, I do have a few names of well-known people in the community that have endorsed me. But the thing I'm most proud of is if you look at my PDC reports, you will see names of people that you have never seen on PDC reports before. And that is because I am supported by the people in our neighborhoods. That is my primary support, where it comes from. They have witnessed me helping in my own neighborhood. They've witnessed me helping at the Heights, at the Navigation Center, anywhere where there's neighborhood issues. I'm on the board of the Vancouver Neighborhood Alliance. I'm the co-chair of the Haug Neighborhood Association. I am there with the people, and I understand them. And the biggest thing is that I have this never-ending desire to learn more about all the people in our community. And I have just learned so much, and I recognize that there's still so much to learn. And I believe that I am the person that truly will represent our community. And I'm a person that really can look at an issue and from a holistic view, and set aside my personal opinions and look at that issue and make a decision that benefits the community at a whole and is a reasonable compromise. And then I'm huge on finding those impacts. How are we impacting? Because there are decisions that you make all the time that there are some winners and losers, and you need to understand the losers and how you can impact, or how you can mitigate the impacts that you've created on those individuals.
Okay,
and I believe I'm
stop you there.
Sure.
Thank you. David, why should voters support you?
Well, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm the president of my HOA down here. I've been on boards and looked over programs, and before I was elected here, there was a project that was going on for a big renovation that the previous board was looking at spending about $14 million on. They had taken advice from different, experts, and didn't really have any idea about how the project would look or take place, but they came up with a big fat paycheck for the engineer on it. And when we had identified areas that weren't seeming really right to us, we had mentioned that, we had brought up to the community, and they weren't changing. So instead, the community kind of stepped up and elected new leadership and me as their president. And next week we begin construction on the job that will complete the full project at a price tag of about 3.2 million. So instead of spending 14 million, we're spending 3.2, and it took 6 years or so to try to come up with that one. We got this done in 6 months. So when I talk about real solutions for these different issues, I'm coming out of a place from experience where I can look at projects or needs, bring the right people together, and actually execute and come up with real solutions for areas that we're looking at right now, like with the homeless situation. We can fix this. We can come together, we can fix this issue in our community, and we can help people. But it's going to take somebody with the experience to actually kind of drive those points home and make it happen. And I can bring that to the table. And well, there's a lot of people that showed up at our meetings here even, and show up at the council meetings, and they can point out the things that are wrong and issues that need fixed. I'm coming to the table to bring solutions and actually make that happen. So initially when I was talking to our business community and all the people that are investing in developing the waterfront and revitalization of downtown, those are the people who had asked me to run. They wanted somebody that would kind of protect the investments that they're bringing into our city to make sure it didn't get ran over like Portland did. And then since then, I've had homeowners associations and neighborhood associations reaching out almost every single day. The chair of a different homeowners association wants to meet for coffee and support my campaign. And I'm getting a ton of support coming from all the neighborhoods because I'm going out and I'm reaching out. I'm really understanding their views, and I want to represent that on the council. So I know that both from the investment side, just people wanting to bring jobs into our city, but also from the neighborhood side, working with the community, that's where most of my support is coming from. I've lived here for over 2 decades. I love Vancouver. I love the city. And I share the vision that I think most of us have for the city. We can be something really, really special. And I just want to help in whatever way I can to make sure that our city goes in the right direction where we can achieve our goals and that vision and bring people together and just be the beautiful city of Vancouver that we're becoming more and more of every single day. And so I ask for everybody's support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Diana?
Thank you very much. A voice and lived experience like mine have never been on Vancouver City Council. I bring over 10 years of community advocacy work and civil rights, over 25 years of public land management, and the experience of a statewide commissioner, and as a resident from East Vancouver. My approach to decisions and policymaking is different than what is on council now. I aim to hear, learn, and incorporate, rebuild systemic changes that will make our city government better for everyone. I will work tirelessly to improve our quality of life and will use our city's competitive advantages to attract the community-minded businesses we need to provide the living wage jobs while supporting our current small businesses. I have a broad spectrum of supporters. I have over 100 endorsements. You can take a look at my website. I'm proud to have the endorsement from former mayors Royce Pollard and Tim Levitt, business leaders Tim Schauer, Ellie Kassab, nonprofit leaders Mark Mantei, Jeannie Bennett, philanthropist Michael Lynch, Paul Spear, and I'm proudly endorsed by the Firefighter Union, the Longshoremen, the National Women's Political Caucus, Washington Conservation Voters, labor unions, and other groups.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you, and good luck.
Thank you for an excellent session. It was very interesting.
Yeah, good session.
Thank you.
Thank you.